Welcome back to Byline. This is a public affairs show right here at Amherst Media, and it's co-sponsored and organized by the Amherst League of Women Voters. And we're in a continuing series of conversations on the show with people who are either elected or appointed to do important work here in town, and the lens through which we look for this whole program is how we're doing on implementing the new charter, which the voters put in place in the last election cycle. And so we are now happy to be joined by our new Senior Center Director, Mary Beth, and your last name is Ogulewicz.
You got it.
Ogulewicz, thank you.
Ogulewicz, yeah.
It's so funny. You know, I practice before the show goes on, and then I always stumble on those hard names.
Oh, you know.
But Mary Beth Ogulewicz, welcome to our show. And we want to welcome you to your post. You've been in place for a whole 90 days or so.
That's correct.
So that's really quite, you're still very much at the beginning, and so must be in a bit of a tailspin as you're trying to sort everything out. Why don't you give us a little bit of background, because you've had a very, very interesting educational and professional background, so why don't we start there?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Happy to do it.
I love the opportunity in any way to meet the community, even if it's via media, so thank you so much. And I really feel like my entire professional background has been leading me to this one place. I have to say that this particular position, I think of it as a capstone of my experience. So I have a variety of experiences, and I think that they all come in useful. I was a criminal prosecutor in the DA's office in Hampden County. So there I worked investigating elder abuse and child abuse cases, and really worked with the community about responses and safety and education. And then from there, I went on to becoming an ESL teacher. So I worked at STCC, working with refugees and immigrants and adult language learners. Oh. So that was a really fascinating opportunity to see firsthand what those struggles are, not just in language, but opportunity and barriers to services.
And adjusting to being in a new culture, with new people, a whole new environment. So that's interesting.
Yeah, the emotional impact of that and how that impacts a whole family system. Yeah. And then after that, I took some time. I was a caretaker for my parents, so both of my parents have passed. But I think that it was a real pivot point in my life, because I thought of myself as someone who was well-resourced, who knew how to find services, and it was really an overwhelming experience. And I think that experience of not being able to navigate so well really led me to try to explore how we can help elders more. When my parents passed, both of them, at that period of time, I went and I got a master's in social work. And during that clinical time, I did land here in Amherst. So I was at UMass for my internship at the Center for Women and Community.
And where did you get your master's, MS? It was in Amherst? Yes. Where did you get it?
I got it at Westfield State University.
Oh, very good.
So,
and they have a specialized program in social work with elders, or it's just social work in general?
It's a generalist practice.
Generalist practice.
So I worked at UMass with students, and then I also worked at the YWCA in Springfield with family systems around trauma.
Great.
Yeah. And then from there, there's
didn't
more.
you go back to lawyering again for a bit?
Yeah.
Do I remember that correctly?
That's right.
And where did you do that, and what was the nature of that work?
Yeah. I was at a private firm in Springfield, Morrison Mahoney, and there I focused on representing hospitals, long-term care facilities, and also families, typically around safe discharge planning. So if a hospital has an elderly patient and that patient doesn't have a healthcare proxy or doesn't have family, I would work to help support them. So whether that means getting them a guardian or a conservatorship, and also sort of helping families who might be disputing what is the appropriate care, where ought somebody go. So oftentimes as we age, family members have disagreements about that. So how can we mediate and find a way that we're all working in the best interests? So, and then I came here.
Well, that's really terrific. And so there is no way that when you were young, a law student, and when you started your first job as a public prosecutor, you had no idea that down the road you were going to be a senior center director.
That is absolutely correct.
But all
yes.
of those experiences and how you connected with family systems, through your own family and others, through social work, through all the connections and experiences you had working with elders in different contexts, from abuse to mediation and service planning and discharge, and all of those systems gives you a base and foundation of experience with elders that is probably quite unique.
Yeah, and very useful on a daily basis.
Yeah, so you developed all those different perspectives, perspectives about life as an elder from so many different perspectives and angles that's really quite fascinating. But you also come into a situation where you are following on the being the first leader following a very long time leader, Nancy Pagano, and she of course also worked her way up in the world of working with elders and families through her career, and so you've had some time, I assume, to gather a lot of knowledge about the past, but you're really focused on trying to figure out what is the best of the past that can allow you to move to the future. How are you going about that?
I think it's probably two ways, is listening and observing. And so certainly, Nancy did a fabulous job for over 47 years, really setting and laying a strong foundation and also developing relationships and fostering a lot of goodwill about the senior center and the ways in which many people access it with a whole slew of services and programs. So that's a really great place to be inheriting all of that. And then I think one of the unique pieces, and I always tell people, I chose you, meaning the town of Amherst. I chose you in particular. If this job was in any other community, I don't know that I would have necessarily even applied for it, because I found it fascinating, the particular point at which the town finds itself in its development and articulation as a government. So I found it was really interesting with the new charter, and we have town councilors who are in place for the first time. And really, it's an opportunity for reinventing government and how we do things, evaluating and self-assessment. And so, though there is this really rich history, I think it's also a very potent time for change and opportunity. And I have found that since I arrived, because I was concerned about that, there's a way in which things are being done, but that there is also a great appetite for what is that future.
And people are open to that because the community is going through change, as you described, and you're part of the new beginning. So we're not abandoning the hundreds of years of history in the town. In any aspect of the town's life or work, we're building upon it and reflecting on it as we move into the future with our new form of government. So that's really terrific. And of course, John Clobridge preceded Nancy, and so both of them were long-term leaders. And let's hope you have good health and longevity so that you can be a long-term leader as we as you figure out what the path forward is going to look like. So part of that work is observing and listening, as you said, and part of it is relationship building, because you start with a council on aging that is a group that's appointed here in town that works with our senior center. Can you talk a little bit about what the Council on Aging is and does, so some people who may be viewing who are new to the community and may be looking for new opportunities someday down the road will know what the Council on Aging does and how they do it and how it interacts with you as the new executive.
So they're really an integral part of what we do, and also in terms of they serve as an advisory board. An advisory board means that they look at policies and they give advice to me. So it might be whether it's the durable medical equipment. We are noted for having a convalescence loan equipment program, and sort of what are those features, how can we continue to do that safely. We might look at policies that have to do with broader things about our nutrition program or delivery of home meals. So they are really a wonderful sounding board, and typically the members are also active participants in the community. So they might be actively participating in the senior center itself, or simply individuals who have an interest in senior services more broadly in the community. I think that one of the interesting places, again, that I found appealing for this position is that it is also undergoing a bit of a shift and a transition. And I really appreciated the way that the town council made it a priority, and there's a commitment that's embedded in the charter around inclusivity and acceptance. And that has also been an opportunity. We've recruited individuals who have not typically served. So we were reflecting on what part of my noticing was looking at who wasn't at the table, who wasn't participating, and then forming some of those relationships and recruiting individuals to apply for the Council on Aging. So if anybody is interested at all in applying to the Council on Aging, there are periodic openings. I believe right now we have one opening, and they simply fill out a community activity form that's online, so you're all welcome to do that. And then there is a group that the town manager puts together and goes through an assessment process. But it is important for us to have a representative sample in terms of leadership, because I think it's difficult for me to do outreach to historically underrepresented communities if there's also not those same faces in leadership. So that's an important value that we have going forward in a commitment about who's on the council and helping them to perform their work.
Well, that's terrific, and we've had guests on the show before around the questions of how people are recruited and how people get appointed to various boards. And so this is one of those, it's an official appointment. It's not an ad hoc situation. It's not friends choosing friends. You go through the normal process of putting yourself forward or being nominated by someone and then being willing to have your name put forward by going to the website and putting in your information on that form, and then you get considered along with everyone else. So there is an opening right now, and so if people who are viewing right now think, oh, this sounds interesting, maybe I should do it, go to the website, town website, community activity form, fill it out, get into the process.
Great.
So you also, you said you're listening and observing. Well, one of the ways you're listening and observing is, came up in a conversation before we came on the air, that later after the show you're going to go deliver meals. So there are a whole range of programs at the Senior Center now, and are you sitting in on a lot of those programs? Are you sort of looking through the one-way mirror at what's going on outside your office? Or tell us a little bit about how you're engaging with the existing programs and how that's helping you figure out where we ought to be going.
So, and I think that this draws on my background as a prosecutor, going to the scene. So the way that I learn best is I have to actually immerse myself in the classes, in the experiences. You can read policies and procedures, you can look at statistics, but there's nothing like meeting the face and the person who's receiving that service. So I have participated in a number of our classes. I also teach one. I'm a yoga teacher and meditation teacher. So we have a robust class Thursdays at 11 o'clock. If anybody's interested, it's absolutely free. We have about 20 to 25 people now, and we're gaining steam. So I think that participating is probably one of my key ways that I'm learning what works and what doesn't work. But also it gives me a lens of determining sort of the value. So one could look at just participation rates and say there's only 2 to 3 people in this program, but you know what? For those 2 to 3 people, that program provides an anchor for their week. It provides meaning. It provides community. So as I've talked to people, I try to express that we don't just look at statistics. We don't look at what's necessarily always popular. We look at really what the value is also to the participants, because we all have a wide variety of interests. And if there's a small group that meets and it's really important, we need to keep that in place. And also sometimes transmute that to being a bit more relevant. So we have a craft club, and it's a very small and hearty group, but it's been going on for many, many years. And, there's a question of, do we continue this or not? And it was just a matter of shifting it. So they create incredible pieces of work. So right now they are producing sustainable bags for us, some cloth bags. So the shops are getting away.
Bags.
Yeah.
Wow.
So shops says they're getting rid of the one-use disposable plastic bags.
Plastic bags. Yeah.
And so they have been crafting those away, and we will be setting up and working with the distribution in terms of here's a good way that we can help the climate, we can help the community, and they now have a renewed purpose and a really exciting adventure.
Terrific. Where did that idea come from?
Well, it was for me.
Okay.
I was trying to think of ways I think of it as the multiplier effect.
Yeah.
So I have a climate action group that's beginning, and we're concerned about that piece. And then we have Craft Club, and I think how can we multiply?
Integrate those.
Yeah, and help the community.
Yeah.
Right?
So this is not a green eye shade exercise of looking at the bottom line.
Right.
It's trying to figure out the value of each of the programs and services, et cetera, and figure out if they need to be modernized and how to modernize them and how to integrate with other things.
Right.
So that's really terrific. And, it's early. Obviously, 90 days is not a long time. But are you beginning to sense some trends and some little directions that are sort of keep coming to the front of your mind about, this is a direction we may need to do more work in town?
Yeah.
Any particular themes starting to emerge?
Yeah, there actually are several. The first one is really collaboration. I think across the board, I just held a senior fair that we had for the first time. I invited all of the clubs and organizations from the League of Women Voters to the SALT Council, and it was the first time that we were all in the same space together. Any individual Amherst neighbors that worked with seniors and even some private business people who offer services. And it was fascinating just to see the opportunity to collaborate and sort of the spontaneous generation of opportunities and ways in which we can work together. So I think that first and foremost, one of my concerns and one of my goals is to collaborate more with the community. So whether that be working with the business community, I've approached the chamber. I don't think many people realize, but if people are considering moving to Amherst, they come to the senior center. So that's a place, and they say, what's going on? That's a consideration for home buying and for retirement home buying. And so I reached out to them and I said, do you have the materials? I would love to be a robust sort of cultural offering, and here's everything that we do. So they've provided me with an entire welcome packet from businesses. They reached out to the community. So in the way in which we sort of fold on each other, because what we know about older residents is that one, they support the tax base, they shop locally, they eat locally. Yeah. So there's a way in which we all benefit from that opportunity. So collaboration is just one of those instances, and there's a lot to unpack with that. But the other pieces, and this is so interesting, is so many people tell me when I introduce myself, I know you're there, but I'm not a senior. And they're seniors.
AARP starts calling you a senior at 55.
Right. I'm a senior.
I was so insulted.
Yes, I would guess that you're a senior too. So there is a way in which it's been really interesting to hear about sort of who is my community. And so one of the ways in which it has been interesting is, yes, we do serve elders, but we also serve adult caretakers, and not just adult caretakers who are here in the community, so, children of individuals, but also the family member who might be in California who just visited their mother for the first time and is calling me and saying, my mother's really slipping. What do I do? Where do I go? Can I have someone come visit her on a weekly basis? UMass students, I stood out in front of the fire station the day that they bring the freshmen in, and how many times those young men in particular would come to me and say, I would love to volunteer because my grandmother, my grandfather has dementia, and this is really meaningful. So I think that who we serve is much broader than how we have sort of conceived of ourselves. And I think that one of the interesting pieces of figuring out who it is that we serve, also looking at how we're serving them. and finding some new ways of reaching out to some communities. So we've got some new grant opportunities. For those who don't identify themselves as senior, I am running, for the first time, we're going to have some programs on Saturdays. So that's been also, a call out that I've heard of, if someone is 55 to 65, they're still working, and even into their 70s, a lot of people are working. They can't come to see us in the daytime.
Right.
So we're going to do Living Your Best Life. So we got a grant for $4,000, and we'll be running that, and I'm going to be calling it I'm Not a Senior Saturday. And,
That's great.
Yeah.
And who gave you the grant?
Through the Massachusetts Council on Aging.
Terrific.
So so we're going to be
because you think about the senior center as 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and what about the weekends and the evenings?
Yeah, so that's a piece. And then we've been working with the Latinx community, and we also received some grant money for that. So we have about $7,000. We'll be running a social support group for them, and also a Spanish language chronic health management group.
Oh, interesting.
So in some of those services, my title is actually Director of Senior Services as opposed to the center. And part of that is the conception of the town manager saying it's not just delivery of services in this one place, but if a Latinx community has a place in which they gather, let's meet them there and where they're at.
Well, that's great. That's a new twist on an old theme. So that's really good. And social work. So how do you see your social work background and experience fitting in? I'm sure it's sort of like it's part of you now, so you can't separate it out entirely. But when you look at the community through the eyes of a social worker who has had a lot of experience dealing with seniors, what are you starting to see and think about? Because this is a very youth-oriented community.
Yes.
We have 3 colleges and tens of thousands of students for 9 months of the year, and yet we have a community of some 19 or so thousand people who are year-round residents, and we have our share of seniors among them. So how do you see this from the perspective of a trained social worker?
I think that what I see is a growing need for deeper services. Our social work staff does amazing work, and I don't know that the community really understands the depth of the need and that we provide. So we have elders who, we get reports that they are living in their cars, in their driveways, and they go out to that scene. They help those individuals, they get them housing. People who are facing eviction, they go with them to housing court. One of my social workers is at the Social Security Administration today with another client, because those processes, if you think about it, they're challenging for you and I.
Sure.
And if you imagine that you had any physical infirmity or you lacked some capacity with your mental abilities, it would even be more challenging. So they are on the ground and they are in places and accompanying people. They go out and do visits. But I think that when you talk about projecting the need, we are definitely meeting the need at this point, but I think that the message, and one of the ways in which I can use my position and voice, is really letting the town know about the future need. So in the Community Health Needs Assessment for Cooley Dickinson Hospital that just was published in October, they focused on elders. And in the community of Amherst, their statistic that they provided was that 12% of the residents have dementia, some form. And then their projection is that thereafter in 15 years it will more than double. And our population demographic will shear towards the older end of elderhood, so 75 to 85. So that's a deeper need community when we talk about elderhood from the age of, say, 55 to 60 to 80s and 90s. And that's going to be our largest sort of population bubble. That's where they're going to be projected to be. So I think that we're going to be looking at greater needs. That not only is that the dementia aspect that would be increasing, but statistically, 86% of individuals with dementia live in their homes. So they are the people where we're seeing at Stop and Shop and who are coming to our center. So we have to think about how do we become an age-friendly and dementia-friendly community. And that has also been a really attractive part of my job in speaking with the town manager, is that he has asked me to explore the community being designated an age-friendly and dementia-friendly community, and how that might impact being able to age in place in a way that supports independence and also gives people support to age here in a way that's dignified.
That's great. And so, I mean, it's easy to say, it's not that easy to do.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work that has to be done, and you've described some of the strategies that you're using, collaboration, et cetera. Tell me about the connection with senior housing in the last few minutes that we have. Have you been interacting with the Housing Authority, because we have a number of collections or places where seniors congregate and live. Are you making connections there? Do you see some possibilities of engaging with them in significant ways?
Yes, so they are our next door neighbors, and that is really wonderful, both just in terms of being accessible for participation and also in communicating about problems that might be happening. So what I would say is that our social workers have a tremendous working relationship with the entire administration of the Housing Authority.
Great.
So both at the Clark House and Ann Whalen, we are regularly over there. I would have to say that probably not a day goes by that somebody from our staff is not there, either to visit somebody, to help them with a problem, to do some social work. They have some limited capacity, and so it's been very helpful to have some meetings to determine sort of what is their capacity to meet need, and then where can we fill in the gap. So defining what they do well, and then what do we do really well. So I think that primarily we've been interacting on the social work level around meeting needs and identifying them, and also making sure that they're aware, things from providing nutrition. We have our senior health services, so the nurse that we have goes over and actually holds hours over at the Clark House, so that they can access her services in place. We deliver food to those locations, so both we serve as a center for the Survival Center and the food bank. We get the food, and then we make sure that it gets delivered over to them, so that individuals who might not be able to make that distance, we're helping them. But I think that there's lots of room for progress and for discussion, not only about how we're working presently, but also low-income housing in general. So there's a forum coming up on Monday night if anyone wants to attend, and I think that that's a robust conversation going forward.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming to town. We want to wish you lots of luck, Mary Beth, and I hope that you have a long and productive tenure here in Amherst serving our community.
Thank you.
So, and thank you for joining us, and we'll be back again next week.